my name is Erik. I am a part of a community that has many names, but is currently known as Forefathers for Life. It is a community that is not led, but well, approximately led, but initiated by a guy called Jad T. Jones. It is a brotherhood slash also partly sisterhood, containing people who basically want to better their lives and strengthen each other through all kinds of cooperative efforts.
And what country are you in?
I'm in Sweden, Stockholm, Sweden. I should start this whole thing by saying that I'm not someone who generally follows the news a lot. I mean, obviously, I'm hearing a lot of information from people around me and the people at work and all around. But I just want to have a disclaimer, so to speak, that I'm not the guy who sits and reads 5 Corona articles a day. So the information I get is from what I've seen and heard from other people and seen myself basically. But with that out of the way, yes, we started hearing about the coronavirus early on. Of course, when it began spreading in China, it was sort of like a distant thing that everyone thought was gonna be like Ebola, but more like softcore, so to speak. And then some cases appeared in South Europe, I think, like Italy and stuff like that. And then people got a little more worried. So I mean, naturally, as the virus came closer and closer to to our vicinity, the news covered it, and everyone started to lose their shit, so to speak. When it was in Southern Europe, one of the people at my job, he was visiting Italy, like very close to where it was the worst, basically. And then he came home, like when the whole thing exploded. He magically somehow got home. I don't know how. So that's when I kind of started thinking like, this is maybe like something to think about. Yeah, but people were worried. Yes, some people in my vicinity were worried. Even my dad, who is kind of the most, he laughs off these kinds of things, like he doesn't care about anything. But he actually took this seriously, and he's 70 years old, so I'm glad he's taking some precautions. But yeah, to answer your question, I could, in my immediate vicinity, I saw people acting like scared, and especially my girlfriend is very frightened of this situation. And and of course you see the news and the media time and again. And as the whole thing spread more and more, obviously people got more, for lack of a better word, panicked.
What's the situation now? Are you locked down, or are you?
Depends on what you mean with lockdown, but I mean, compared to what I've heard what other countries do, Sweden is definitely not locked down in that sense. I mean, we still have a lot of restaurants open. Many stores are still open. You can still have yes, a lot of people have lost their jobs. But people are generally still allowed to go out. I mean, it all depends, because some countries take this lockdown thing more serious than others. But compared to pretty much all other countries, including our neighboring Scandinavian countries, pretty much our lockdown is very soft, so to speak. I see wash your hands every day, like at least on 10 different sites and whatnot in Swedish and in English. So they're constantly reminding people of that. I mean, basic precautions: wash your hands, keep away from people. They have begun I know one thing. They've begun with a new rule that you should keep like 2 meters distance from someone. Like, for example, if you're in a line in a store or something, then obviously all people are not doing that. And also I've seen in the stores, all of the people in the food stores, for example, the personnel there, they have special gloves, and they have like a glass window in front of the cash machine, and then and then they have these drawn lines in some stores where you're supposed to stand away from each other. It's not enforced, but it's definitely they've begun doing something. So yeah.
What sort of places are allowed to be open and what are closed, like schools and offices and everything?
Yeah, here's where we get into the details where I'm perhaps not aware of everything, but I know that schools were allowed to be open a while ago, and then some schools started having like home lectures or something like that. So now I think
that by themselves, or was that something that the government brought in, or?
I don't know. Honestly, I don't know particularly about that, but I know that some schools like shut down and some of them are teaching from home. And right now, I don't know particularly about the school situation, but some schools took precautions, but I don't think everything is closed down. I mean, just the other week, I was like bicycling like halfway across town, so to speak, and it was a sunny day. And basically, I saw thousands upon thousands of people walking very close to each other. So and I saw all kinds of stores open and restaurants were open. So it definitely didn't look like a lockdown city to me, at least not in the terms we're speaking of.
Basically, it's just up to the individual business, or?
Well, the hospitals basically they're only allowed to take only like the most emergency of cases. And the respirators, I know, the machines that people use to breathe in worst case scenario, they're basically just all taken. And with regard to that, I know that the hospital is pretty much full, and there are restrictions about that. They've even begun opening like they started to remake like halls where you have like events or something, like huge hall. They made that into like basically military hospitals. And they've and I don't know if it's in effect yet, but they have begun talking about using police force near hospitals to keep people from storming them or something like that. But other than that, I mean, yeah, there are a lot of. I don't think the government has like said that these businesses have to close down, because we haven't really closed our borders that much as other countries, but many businesses have fallen just due to the whole situation in general. I mean, for example, I have a friend who works as a waiter, or not a waiter, but he cooks and he works at a restaurant basically, and he has a job right now, but he says that he's a very lucky one, because most people in that business are basically they have nothing. So I don't think the government has. As far as I know, I don't think the government has closed down like many things, but many businesses have closed down due to the way things are.
People have decided for themselves not to go out. Is that what you're saying? Or
I think so. I think so. Yeah, partly because influences from the society in general, the pressure and the panic. I mean, and I think a lot of these things are caused by people's fear of it, and not perhaps. I mean. Of course, the disease is causing some of the problems and much of the problems, but I think it has more to do with the fear. People are, staying where they are because they don't want to get infected, obviously, or contaminated, or whatever you call it.
And how are they explaining this? Because like your neighboring countries are doing something completely different. So how is it being explained to the population that like you're doing something? What's the reasoning?
We've had several talks, several speeches from our like prime minister, and he's like gone out with general like guidelines, like, but it's been more like pep talks, like we have to support our medical field experts, and we have medical staff at all times, and blah 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 blah. Basically, my theory is that Sweden hasn't really experienced any major conflict. Both not just like our last war was 1814, like over 200 years ago, and it was a war of about 3 weeks with Norway. Norway basically said, "Hey, we want independence." We're like, "Fuck no!" And then okay, no. But basically that's not the point. But the point is that we weren't a part of any of the world wars, and no other like major catastrophes have really befallen us for a very, very long time. And I think, and that's very good. Thank God for that, of course. But due to that, maybe we have become a bit secluded or like shielded from the horrors of the world, basically. And I think that in turn, that in turn has really created a sort of maybe naive and over and damagingly optimistic mindset in many people here in Sweden. So I think that is a reason why why our government is acting very differently from many other countries, because of the whole mentality thing. This isn't the first time Sweden has acted irrationally in some situations. So that's at least my take on it.
And do people in general support it, or are they asking? Are they bothered by it?
like the general consensus vote-wise, like percentage in the whole country, I don't know about, but people in my vicinity most people in my vicinity, I mean, dozens and dozens of people I've talked to, seem to agree with me that Sweden is, taking far too light precautions, and we're not doing enough in terms of really protecting ourselves. And I actually did look at some statistics before this call, and from what I can see, it's not going in the right direction. So I think most people's concerns are valid.
In terms of when people who've lost their work because of this, what's being done to support them?
I read a quick article, actually, or like read it through quickly, where I read that the unemployment rate in Sweden, or the unemployment percentage, is expected to go up to 9% during this year. I don't know what the current is, but it's not that. It's way lower. I know that the government has somewhere magically drawn up some money, would expect from some hidden treasure, or more likely some sort of debt. I don't know. But but the government has made like an effort to try to keep some businesses alive. My girlfriend works at a store where basically she sells all kinds of fish and fish food and related stuff, like aquarium related animals, marine, whatever. But and that store belongs to a chain of other stores that sells stuff for animals. And I know that particular business has, and many other like businesses, have gotten financial support from somewhere higher up. I don't know. And I know that our prime minister has gone out and told us that they're going to put in money in X business here, X business there. So they are doing an effort to keep the country alive in some aspects. I've also read some disconcerting reports from some, I think, some financial. She's the owner of a fund that basically manages all the pensions in Sweden, or most of the pensions, and she is basically turned into a doomsday prophet, like many other people have, I suppose. But yeah, to answer your question, money is being put forth from the government and being distributed to some businesses in order for them to not collapse. So an effort is being made at the cost of God only knows what to keep the country somewhat afloat. Many people who work in businesses that aren't maybe like directly, keeping society alive, so to speak, like entertainers, musicians, actors. I mean, occupations that are necessary but not essential for survival. Many of those kinds of people are out of a job right now, and I wouldn't expect the government to use what scarce resources they have to keep those businesses alive. So I guess many of those people are kind of fucked in a way. Not like fucked for life, but maybe fucked at the moment, so to speak. I just think the general plan right now, from what I've seen, is to keep the most essential things going.
Okay, so say tomorrow you wake up and you think like, you've got a cough, you've got a fever, you think you've got coronavirus. What would you do?
I would stay in, drink a lot of tea, drink a lot of water, try to sleep. I would treat it as a regular cold. And I've seen all kinds of like guidelines, like if you're feeling this, do this. I was actually on a website, it's like a public like healthcare website, and then there are on the first page there's points where if you feel like this, do this. So yeah, there are some. We're not badly informed, I would say. The government at least tries to care of the people in that way. If you're really feeling really sick, then you should probably contact the hospital. But they're definitely not encouraging that because
yeah.
they're overwhelmed. And I would only start to lose my shit and call the hospital if I really, really felt sick.
What stage do you actually get a test?
I think when you have really severe like symptoms, like you're not near death, but you're very, very sick. I've heard of people who, as I said, the respirators are basically now all gone, I think, or in use, basically. But I don't think you're like even allowed into hospital until you're severely sick, like you can't breathe, for example. That's one of the harsher symptoms of corona. So when you're having real trouble breathing, I guess that would be a situation where the hospital would consider letting you in at least.
Do you have any reason to doubt like the amount of infections, the amount of deaths, or do you think that that's being truthfully?
Of course, I mean, that's a very valid point, and of course there's a reason to doubt it because the hospitals are so crowded right now. So so there's definitely a reason to take statistics with a grain of salt, but in that sense, I guess it would be more realistically to kind of presume that more people are infected than we know, because basically now, I mean, for like 1.5 months, we haven't tested like anyone, I think, for corona. I was quite sick for a while. I didn't have a fever, but I had a very long and irritating bad cold for like 1.5 weeks. So I had to stay home from work and everything. And I tried, and basically my company where I work for said that, you know, everyone who has a slight flu must check themselves. And I called the hospital and they're like, if you're not dying, get the fuck out, basically. So yeah, but to get back to what you say, the statistics are of course to be taken with a grain of salt because the hospitals just can't keep up. So I think you should maybe take at least the amount of people infected and maybe double it, maybe quadruple it. I don't know. But
what's Stockholm like as a city?
Stockholm has a lot of has a lot of suburbs. I mean, there is of course the inner part of the city which is very much more crowded. But you know, most of the people I know, and you know, the majority of the people who belong to the Stockholm County, so to speak, they live in the suburbs, and even like close to when you get not when you get close to town, but you know, obviously the closer to the city you get, but the inner city you get, the more crowded it gets. But still, like you can, you know, travel for like 5 minutes by subway, and then you're at a place where there's trees everywhere. So I mean, and of course they're always building more and more buildings everywhere and trying to remove some nature because, you know, people want to make money to sell houses because it makes money. But generally, I've been in many cities. I've been in London, I've been in Moscow, I've been in many capital cities so far. And Sweden is very, very nature oriented in that sense. Lots of water, lots of trees and nature. So maybe you're right. We're probably not that overcrowded in terms of many other cities. But I know for a fact that Stockholm is, of course, the most affected city in all of Sweden. Also, it has a lot of statistics with corona. It's like the plague center of Sweden as of now, because many other, I mean, there are of course, you know, many cities in Sweden, and I've been in many smaller cities, and they're basically, people don't live that close to each other there as in other cities. So the medical system in our country is strong because pretty much anyone can get healthcare. That's a strong point, but I don't think it's like strong in the sense that you always get tip-top care almost. It's just that it's free. It's not always optimal because, you know, to put it very bluntly, the doctor doesn't get more money if he fixes the patient or not. I don't know how it is in the US, but I guess it's more common there with private doctors and shit, and that obviously makes the doctor work harder. But to get to the point, I mean, our healthcare system is very, very good in terms of that everyone that needs to get help gets help usually, but it's still like, you know, it only gets you as far as free goes because money, you know, people work for money. So but judging by pure logic and like fact and, you know, people, you know, drawing conclusions for themselves, I mean, obviously the medical system now is very fragile. But yeah, but in terms of people's trust in the healthcare system, I mean it's basically breaking down. So I would imagine, you know, most people don't put too much trust in something that is falling apart, as it is in most other countries, I would assume.